are back with another episode of the Drum Corps Coffee Shop podcast.
Thank goodness.
George, how's it going, man?
It's going well.
So
Doing good, yeah.
So it hasn't been like the typical months since our last episode.
Right.
So, and I'm really hyped for today's episode.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I'm hyped is this year is the 50th anniversary of DCI.
Mm-hmm.
1972 DCI started.
Yeah.
And since then, through those 50 years, there's been several iconic shows
Mm-hmm.
that just stand the test of time
Mm-hmm.
and that have kind of helped transform the activity to what
Right.
it is.
Right.
One of those shows, 1993 Star of Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we are fortunate enough today to not only have the person who was the drum major of that year,
Yep.
but has also gone on to have success as a
In some other areas.
in some other areas, and we'll get to that. And we'll
Yeah.
get to that. But I am stoked because like that whole era of Star is just fantastic.
Yep. And we have somebody that was there today that was there during that whole era.
Yeah.
And we're going to be a little bit out of Caption today, but in a good way.
Yeah,
In a really great way.
Like we're drummers typically,
Mm-hmm.
but when the chance comes to interview like a horn person that's an iconic part of the activity.
Right. And somebody who has been a part of the activity for a really long time and responsible for the growth of it and has had a really amazing positive impact on the activity. So today's
Yes.
going to be a really good day, really good conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
So go ahead, George. I'll
Well,
give
I mean,
you the honors.
We have the notable Mr. Matt Harloff.
Welcome to the shop, Matt.
Welcome to the shop, Matt.
Thank you very much. It's very, very kind. Lucky to have been around Star of Indiana, and certainly, been around Drum Corps for a while now. So certainly honored, and thank you very much. And thanks for asking me. Even though, like you said, you're kind of leaving your caption a little bit. I'll do my best to try to remember that that year because that Star drum line that year was pretty spectacular. And I had a front row seat to watch all of that, so it was awesome seeing it. So I'll do my best to try to remember all of those things.
Oh yeah.
Well, can we go? I mean, can we go back to even before that? And how does a Matt Harloff even get engaged in the activity? Like, what was your introduction to doing this thing?
Was it PBS like the rest of us, or are you? I take it where are you from, Matt? Let's start from the beginning.
I was born and raised in Iowa.
Okay.
And the answer to the question is my dad. He was my band director.
Okay.
So, and we were introduced to, back in the day, drum corps style marching band. And so high school marching bands wanted to kind of leave the traditional, some of them, but a certain school that my dad was a band director, and they wanted to do the drum corps style marching band.
Right.
So that led us into watching drum corps, the Spirit of Atlanta 80s, the Blue Devils early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And so being from Iowa, we were able to, and then DCI Finals was in Madison in the 80s. So we would either go to DCI North, I think that's what they called it, in Whitewater.
Right.
We would either do that every year, or once finals was in Madison, we would go up, and that would kind of be our family vacation.
Mm-hmm.
We would go to DCI Finals. So that's who introduced me to drum corps, and it just became something that we loved doing. And growing up, watching some of those iconic drum corps, in the 80s, you just fell in love with it, and it's like, I want to do that. So that's who introduced me to drum corps. And then being from the Midwest, we did some feeder corps,
Right.
like the Dubuque Colt Cadets. They were a cute little drum corps.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that for a couple of summers. And when I say summers, it were kind of like half summers by then, maybe a small little tour, but certainly not much what it is now, for sure.
What did you play? What was your weapon of choice back then? Your instrument?
Soprano. Yeah, and I actually still have. Yeah, I still have a 2-valve Dynast Deg. It's like down in my closet downstairs. I still have it. My dad bought it for me. So awesome. So I never did the rotor. I never did that. I did the 2-valve. So
So now I hear you say soprano. So is it safe to say you weren't an upper lead soprano? Because usually those guys, they always have to say upper lead soprano. It's not just soprano. It's like upper lead.
They have to designate
Yeah.
the specificity.
you know what? When we get into the star days, I'll tell you that I started as a third soprano. When I started there, and then I kind of worked my way up. And then in '92, that was my only year I was a lead, and I played. I was one of the 3 soloists in Amber Waves. So when we did that ballad, so Josh Talbot and Rich was the other one. So yeah. Anyway, so I guess I just say soprano because I played all the parts.
It's refreshing to meet a modest soprano player because typically,
Yeah, exactly. So when you went from having it be, basically a part of your family upbringing, right? And then being a fan, but then actually doing it for the first time, right? The young Matt Harloff trying to getting out there on the field, struggles. What was it like for you?
Oh, it was fun. It was a blast. It was, I remember car rides with my dad taking me to camps and stuff. It was never really a struggle. And if there was, maybe and then it's hard now because of, all the different, obstacles kids have to overcome, whether it be financially or whether it be just the travel or whatever. If there were any obstacles, it was kept from me. It was just, I have all but awesome memories. After Colt Cadets, we did a couple of years with the Phantom Regiment Cadets, the long blue line. So that was awesome too, because they would have Sunday rehearsals. So we would I was from Iowa, so it was about, I think, 4, maybe 6 hour drive. We would leave early in the morning. We would drive up, not every Sunday, but it was a lot. Like every other Sunday, we would go to Rockford and do the afternoon rehearsal and then drive back. Those are some of the best. My family was really, really close because of those kinds of things. And we also moved around a lot in Iowa. I think I personally went to 3 different schools. Never once I got into middle school and high school, then we stopped moving. But my mom and dad, we moved around a little bit, so we were really, really close. So just spending time with my dad, my mom, and my brother, it was awesome.
Older brother, younger brother?
Younger brother. In fact, Ben was in Blast.
Okay.
So, and if you ever go to YouTube and watch Blast, he'll hate me for saying this, but if you've seen Blast, and especially the videos, he's the guy that comes down the chair. He's that trumpet soloist that's on the chair that comes down from the ceiling.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
awesome.
Ben.
Man, what a childhood.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's just a testament to
My parents.
And just family support, right? And how important that is, and how big of an impact that can have.
Yeah. My parents were huge in all that. They told me, and it's what I wanted. My only way of thanking them was doing it for my own children. And I was just like, hey, should I have a job? Should I work at McDonald's? Now I did have a paper route, but you really want to call that a job? Because that was in the morning. But I distinctly remember them saying, your job is to get good grades. Your job is to do that. That's what your job is. You do that. And so they paid for, when I went to IU, Indiana University, they paid for all of my schooling. And then when I finally got the Avon job, when I got out of college, they just signed over the student loans to me. So, so when you talk about support, of course, my mom and dad were our biggest fans, and they loved drum corps as much as we did. So, but yeah, then you have that financial support that, is certainly priceless. And, And like I said, Susie and I, we're trying to do the same thing for our own children.
For sure.
Yeah.
So.
You talked about going to Whitewater as a kid, and I got to ask, were you there in '84 when the cadets
when the cadets went down?
Yeah. Can you kind of describe that, like what you saw? Because I've seen like a couple pictures, and everybody talks about it was just like the domino effect. Is that pretty much what it was like?
Yeah. If I remember, and again, I was young, so I vaguely remember.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the stories have kind of escalated. To the point where it's maybe somebody said, yeah, the whole horn line went down. It wasn't that. If I remember right, it was like just the end of it. I could be wrong, but I was there, and it was just tight form. Someone stepped on somebody and tripped and took some people out and all that. But yes, I was there for that.
That's awesome. That's one of those moments that I wish that there was video of, just because I've seen so many stories about it.
See it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So Colt cadets, Phantom Regiment cadets.
Yes, sir.
During that time, did you already have sort of like a goal, a corps that you were like a big fan of that you wanted to eventually march, or did you just know you just wanted to keep doing it and keep growing?
Always wanted to be a Garfield cadet.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's hard to not love the Santa Clara Vanguard. I loved their shows. The Festive Overture and the Great Gate and the picture stuff.
Yeah.
I loved that. I loved the La Fiesta time with the Blue Devils.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately being the Midwest guy, it was always like, well, that's too far away in California.
Sure.
But I wanted to be, I wanted to be a Garfield cadet. That's what I wanted to do. And so.
Did you ever audition, or did you ever try that route? No.
Well, when I went to Indiana University, it obviously set me up for Star. So, and then when you learn who was teaching, those were the Garfield guys.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Jim Prime, George Angali, and
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm in the right place now. And, obviously then you make friends. And then, like I said, I was at IU anyway, so it was my home. And my parents ended up moving to Indiana. So, that's kind of where I was ultimately going to go to Garfield. I wanted to, I dreamed of doing that, but, just kind of didn't work out.
Now, you talk about Garfield, like that was your favorite corps. Do you have any specific favorite shows that you would just like on cassette, just rewind and play over and over?
Oh yeah. And I would have it while I was mowing the lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, like, 83, 84, 85, 87.
Yeah. Easy.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what really was what I loved most about it was, of course, the shows, of course, the arrangements, the power, the Rocky Point Holiday, the West Side Story, but it was also the crowds. When you listen to, I'm a huge sports fan, so and my dad was born and raised in New York, so we're big Yankee fans. So you watch the Yankee game, crowd goes crazy, and then here in our world, you listen to a cassette recording of Garfield, and you can't even hear the end of the '87 show because the crowd is going nuts. And I was in the audience for that. So, and what an awesome night! You had Vanguard and both drum corps, incredible. It was a great night. One of the best nights in drum corps history, has to be. Certainly from an audience perspective.
Without a doubt. In fact, that whole evening is still like a hot debated topic, and and even like that finals retreat and everything. We've had some people that were there for that, and that always comes up, and it's interesting to hear their perspective on things.
That was, it was a pivotal year for the activity.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
And not gonna lie, I was rooting for Vanguard.
Sure.
Shouldn't say that publicly, but I was rooting for Vanguard.
It's okay now.
It's all right.
It's how many years later? We're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah. Drum corps people don't have long memories. No, not at all.
Not at all.
But I fell in love listening to those recordings and also listening to the audience.
Yeah.
That's the part that for me gave me goosebumps. Just as much as, watching the actual drum corps. Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm glad that is the case here now. Now I compete with a lot of these corps and all that, and so it's more envious when you see a drum corps get that you know, where it's almost more enjoyable, more fun to watch the audience than it is the drum corps.
Right.
Yeah.
Those really special moments. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why George always talks about having like an audience cam, like whenever we record stuff, just a designated audience cam, just to see them.
And you know what? I'll just interrupt myself by saying how fun it was to be in the audience this past year watching the Phantom Regiment. You know, I'm usually never in the audience to watch an entire drum corps show, but you know, it was so much fun being there watching Phantom Regiment this past summer. It was great.
So when you go to Star, was the staff like the deciding factor on this is where I
No.
want to go? Or just friends and
friends,
proximity? Yeah.
Yep. You just meet people. It was a family atmosphere. You know, Jim Mason wanted that. And then of course, there's Bill Cook. You were taken care of. And then when you got to know the staff, you're like, oh, you know. And then of course they treated you like a 10. You know, pushed you, but yet loved you. And like I said, you created friends that you weren't going to leave. And then in that time, it's a little bit different now. But in that time, you became loyal to your drum corps.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, where, you know, every once in a while there was somebody that would go somewhere else and all that. But, you know, then you were loyal. And when you did that, you know, March a year, then you were like hooked. So, you know, I obviously met friends for life. My first year in Star was 89. I never wore the pinks.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will say I watched 88, which was a huge jump. If you ever watch the Star, just the history of Star, there was a huge jump from 87 to 88. And the quality, yeah. So, you know, I saw that at DCM. And I was like, wow, that brass hit in Porgy and Bess was like, jeez. So, yeah, it was like, okay, I want to do that.
I always think of that soprano sustaining that note in Porgy and Bess for like forever.
Barry Hudson. Yep. Barry Hudson's his name. He's on staff at Crown.
Oh wow.
He taught Star. He aged out that year. Taught Star. Was there the whole summer. You know, so he kicked our butt the whole summer. But you know, he also was. He's just an incredible personality. Great drum corps guy. And yeah, we bring him around in Crown. Like the last 2 weeks, he'll come around and it's great to have him around there. He's that Boston accent. He's a Boston guy, you know, and he's a big hockey fan. He used to be a hockey coach recently, so whenever I have set the rehearsal, it's like, all right, hockey practice with Barry Hudson.
Yeah, it's funny. Like as a drumline guy, back then I would ask like my horn player friend, hey, how is he doing that? How is he playing that? And I learned the term, was it circular breathing?
No, I don't think he ever did that. I think that was one breath.
Wow.
Yeah. You can circular breathe. My brother does it in Blast. He's the soloist at the beginning of Malaguena. Mm-hmm. So he learned how to do that. And he holds this long note on a flugelhorn. And he circular breathes that. I don't think Barry did that. I think that was one breath.
Wow. That's even more impressive now.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get to Star.
And Star is a young corps at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And and definitely on the rise, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
every year they're making these jumps. What was it like to be there, like a part of that? You know?
Yeah, I
Or
ultimately,
was that not even a thought in your brain? Like you were just showing up and doing it, and
I was drum corps for me during that. I mean, of course we're all competitive and all that, and but it was about being around great people. So it was always about that. So you know, I don't, you know, I mean, again, we're all very competitive people, but you know, when we went to after 89 and 90, which was a tough year, certainly to begin with, because we had a lot of holes coming out on tour, a lot of holes, and but that was obviously the year of like, okay, Star is one of the big boys now. So at that point, it was like, oh, okay, you know, we can do this now. You know, we're one of the big boys, and I've been blessed to have that a number of times. You know, Avon is another one where it's like we've built that, and you know, I never thought never went to Star to be like, hey, I'm going to go to Star to win a world championship. I just want to, I didn't even know I was going to be there for that long. So it's just, you meet the people, and the one thing that I have learned is that drum corps is more about the people than anything else, and it always has been and always will be. And when we went after the 90 year, we just then started to believe that we could be the best. We didn't know, it was like a dream, it's like being one of the last ones called. But after 90, we're like, oh, okay, we can do this now. And, in terms of competing. But I will tell you, if you're going to ask me, and if there was a lot of Star people here who march, with me 89 all the way through 93, you ask us what is our favorite show, without blinking, it's 90.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's without even, and we loved 91, 92, 93, but we loved that. But without question, that was an extremely special year for everybody, members, administration, volunteers, for everybody. And it's not because we won our first Caption award. It was just this, we loved the show so much. George Zingali was around a lot and taught us how to love a show, taught us how to get into a show and understand what the show is like and perform that show. That is a year I will, my favorite year as a performer, for sure, without a doubt.
Is 90, was that show as hard as it sounds and looks, or is it like smoke and mirrors where, because it looks and sounds like incredibly difficult?
I tell the story a lot especially now coming out of COVID, when we're all not in shape as much as we were before COVID. Whether it is not in shape because we were inside and didn't go outside of heat, or we just weren't as active as maybe we would have been if it was normal, right? So I tell a story a lot as I see performers struggle and are tired, and this hurts, and I'm not in shape, and I tell them a story about Letter B. Letter B of Star was the closer, and it was it was just that, and all right, every day set up Letter B. Oh, it was pain. Your muscles twitch when you heard Letter B. And we would have songs about Letter B. And yes, it was extremely hard. And of course, the last time you set up Letter B, that last day, you start crying because you did it. You achieved that. It was one of the hardest things you ever did, and you got through it, and you won. And I remember that. I've been telling that story a lot because it kind of fits now, because you're going to do every drum corps, probably, we're going to do things that we're not used to doing, that are going to be very, very, very difficult. You can't stop trying. You can't. And you have to love that it's hard. And then you got to fight and continue fighting. And then eventually you'll get great at it. You may not ever be comfortable because it's hard. But you see the best athletes in the world do things extremely hard, and they're dying with sweat, even when they're in the best shape of their lives. You're going to be the same way. And then when it's all said and done, you're going to be proud of what you were able to accomplish. So, but yes, Dan, that's a long answer to your question of, was that show hard? Yes. Muscles were hard, or it's just sore. I mean, it was
the middle horn. The middle horn parts just sound ridiculously crazy.
It was a stacked mellophone section that I remember Donnie moving some. I was not one of them. Donnie moved a number of our top trumpet players to mellophone. It was literally it's the stacked mellophone line. You are all going to play mellophone. So I moved up to second trumpet that year. So yeah, I wasn't one of the ringers playing mellophone.
It's interesting hearing you talk about that year, right? Because in the 50 years that that DCI has been around, still only a handful of cores have won, and been and have sort of. We got into this a little bit in our last discussion when we were talking about indoor, about how there's like, it's almost like there's tiers to groups, and for the groups that are trying to break into even just being in the conversation of possibly winning, sometimes that leap can be like, it's like a chasm that's just mysterious. Like, how do we get across that? But hearing you talk about like in 90 that you knew that now you were in the conversation, that it went from being like something other groups did to being now possible for us, right? And obviously that's something that you've created. Like, there's repetition in that. You experienced it as a member, and you were then able to create it for the other groups that you've worked with, and that we will eventually talk about. That's amazing. Is there anything? I know you talked a little bit about Zengali and how he handled you guys during that year. Is there anything else about that year that you felt like really contributed to like creating, yes, we are in the conversation? Or was it just a product of like afterwards you realized, wow, we're in this club now?
Yeah. I don't, other than the design of the show, and how much we loved it, how much we loved performing it, how much we loved each other, and and then at the end, I mean, it's different in the competition world. It was different then because we didn't really have like the regionals like we do now, wherever you kind of know where you're at. Everybody's together, everybody does the same tour. The regionals were separate. It was a lot of times it was DCI Mid-America in Bloomington and Allentown. It was, maybe a regional
Tennessee.
And Drums Along the Rockies. Like there was 2 regionals all in different places. So you never really knew where you were at until the end. So it was a little bit of a surprise. And those are the best ones when, where you didn't really know where you were going to be, or we didn't know we were going to win brass that night. We didn't know, and all of a sudden brass goes to stars. Like, what? And that was when it was that night, not an average. So and the recaps weren't as accessible, so and our staff really, they didn't want us to worry about the numbers. It was, you worry about being as great as you possibly can be. That's what you worry about. You don't worry about the numbers. So it's interesting when, an old recap will come up and like, I've never seen it before. So, it's, kind of interesting. You look at the, who's judging and, the ordinals and, how all that, it's obviously and obviously there's a bunch of websites with all that, but I don't know. It was, I'm not sure if there's anything else I could say about that 90, about now that, we know we're one of the big boys now,
You've said a
we
lot.
believe that.
Like,
yeah.
The training, the people that you were doing it with, like you mentioned before, like that's really important. But then also, especially if you're doing it for the first time for like your ensemble, your group, a little bit of that ignorance about the fact that you're doing it helps. That's the way it was for us in when I was at Blue Devils, because it had been a while since the core had won. It had been a while since the percussion section had won. We were like a brand new generation, and all we did was work hard. And then we were very lucky in that for first tour, instead of doing the normal California tour, we went back east and we faced cadets. And they had won the previous year, and we were like, oh, that's like exactly like all of a sudden, oh really? Like this is where we're at, But maybe if we had more awareness on it, it would have changed our trajectory,
Yeah.
So,
one thing before we leave 90, maybe you can answer this riddle for me. The banner comes out, the Mene Tequila Parsum. It's funny how I still remember all this. Okay, you talk about audience reaction. Oh my God, the baby's burning. Is it the baby's burning or is it the gravy's burning? Is that like an inside thing from that show?
No, it's I know it's somebody.
It's just some random thing. I've always wondered if that was like an inside thing. I guess the mystery will just have to stay there, like the end of the '80s.
It was just some audience member that said, "I would imagine it's baby." You know, I know what he's talking about, but it's. Yeah.
I mean, you could hear it clear as day on all the recordings.
Yeah.
But I still yell it every time I watch that show. It's funny. The things you take away, like in a lot of shows, I watch the audience reaction, and I can yell along to it. Like,
along those lines, that speaks to how little media, like how little content we had as far as our exposure to the activity.
Yeah.
Like these days, we're inundated, right? It's like everywhere. We have podcasts, we have Instagram, we
lot
have
videos,
lot videos. We have all this stuff. But back then, it was like the little bit we had, it became burned into our memories. You know.
I could tell you every in a Blue Devils show and every like Take It to the Beach, Suncoast, and those recordings. You know, the audience reaction. That's like an important part of the show.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
So you guys going to moving along. You guys going to '91, and I know the talk amongst us younger people when we were like in high school and stuff was like, oh man, Stars, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. And then I find out you guys are doing Pines of Rome, which I played in high school. And it's like, oh, all right, cool. And then you guys go out there, you guys get it done. What was the difference? Was there a different mindset from 90 to 91 amongst the members now that you'd broken into that next tier, like George called it?
Well, yeah, in a way, there was a lot of, and that maybe that's why 91 isn't as, popular or not one of our favorite summers. There was more pressure for sure. We talked about competition more that summer. So and it was, we knew we could win. We knew that. So it was a matter of doing that. So there was certainly more pressure. It was that was even harder than the year before. So I obviously I wasn't in the design meetings, but Appian Way I think may have been talked about as being part of the show. We learned it, and it was our parade tune.
What a parade tune!
Talk about a chop buster parade. Now, Star, we only would do one parade a year, and it was the Indy 500 parade, and that was the first time that we would get our our marching shoes. So a lot of kids would come out of there with the marching, like blood all over their feet, especially their heels and all that. So it was breaking in the shoes. We wouldn't. It was normally hot, so we wouldn't like go in normal costume or anything, or uniform. Sorry. Appian Way was that parade tune that year. But yeah, Villa, the beginning, hard. The line was really, really talented. Or the brass line was talented. Actually, you never really asked me about the percussion section in 90. Not to back up, but
sure.
There was 5 snares at finals.
Yeah.
Yep.
Was that by design, or did they just injuries?
2. I think it was 2. That was when we had, and I don't remember the names, and even if I would, I wouldn't say them anyway.
Sure.
But that was when we had first tour, second tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
very common back then. Yeah, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and then the whole big long
first
tour.
Tour for us was Midwest DCM, and then after Drum Corps Midwest, we would come back to Bloomington. Now it wouldn't be like, hey guys, go home or anything. I never went home.
Yeah.
But there was a day off, whatever. I think that's when we would like do our, take pictures or maybe we did that before that. I can't remember. But anyway, it was an obvious first tour, second tour.
Yeah.
And 2 of the snare drums left.
Oh, they just left.
Left.
Oh, okay.
They probably got tired of getting their butts kicked up with that drill.
And so then all of a sudden we had 5 snares.
Wow.
And at that point, the staff made the decision, we can't find 2 more to come in here with a month and a half left of the season.
Right.
So we had, the best decision was to go with 5.
Was that Bob Dubinsky? Was he the percussion guy then?
And Tom Hannum started to come around,
okay.
but yeah.
Okay.
So, but anyway, 90, we obviously didn't have that problem. The line was full, everything was full, really, really hard. Everything was difficult. The biggest thing that, is the ending. The end of, when you see
The crosses, yeah, the crosses.
yeah, well, we could talk about that a little bit, but that was not. If you see an early video of that show, like the ending is totally different musically. I mean, we were more towards the original. I mean, it was really hard, the music for that, and we did that for a long time. And those costumes, by the way, were not light. Those it was the red that we got and for the British show. So took all the stuff off, the plaid stuff off, and then put this sequence thing, the Roman sequence thing, and then the helmets. So hot. It was so hot, and heavy. And but anyway, another mellophone section, just stacked mellophone line. I think I was one of 6 second trumpets, 5 or 6 second trumpets. Just so actually, it was probably one of the easiest years for me. It was my 3rd year, so I had experience, and my responsibilities wasn't as great as the mellophone. They had that. I didn't have that. So it was probably one of the easiest summers for me. But anyway, really, really hard. And like I said, you watch our first show of the year, and then the last show. It went through a lot of upgrades, and let's change this, and
well, the very end, that's like iconic now. The crosses.
Yeah, the cross. That's a great story. We talked about it in this podcast during COVID when Dan Potter got some people, which was really, really cool. I had forgotten a lot of things, but ultimately the gist of that story, and if you could be a fly on the wall, and go to these moments in drum corps history, being there that night in Boston would be a place that everybody would need to see. And ultimately what happened was we were going to do the new ending, and it was written, and we learned it, and we put it together. And I remember we were done, we put our horns down, we were waiting to hey, what are we doing next? And we're just standing there waiting, and you just saw the staff up there talking. You didn't know what they were talking about. And I remember standing next to, someone that had more experience than I did, and it was my 3rd year. And I still think, to this day, it's Brian Souls. But he goes, uh-oh. I said, what? He goes, that doesn't look good up there. You just see the staff talking. And Jim Mason brought everybody in and said, hey, guys, it's not right. And George Zingali, who was sick at the time, he was leaving the next day. So it had to get done. And by the way, this is the last 2 weeks of the year. So it had to get done that night. So Jim Mason, said, hey, we're staying here until it's done. And if that's till 2 or 3 in the morning, then that's what it's going to do. That's what it's going to be. And so we're like, all right, well, we're like, okay, let's get it done. We're all all in, and George taught all of that from the field. He came down to the field and he taught it from the field. And it was like, okay, and it was all done in sections. I was second soprano. Who are the second sopranos? Tell me what you just did. And we did that 8 counts or whatever it was. And he said, okay, now do this. And he would show us. And then he said, okay, all right, practice that and I'll come back later. And then he would go on to the next section. And so he did it was never charted. So he did that all in his head. Now, the funny thing is, not many people know that what you see on the video is not what was taught that night. Now it was the same idea. It was just, hey, instead of going out 3-yard lines, just go out 1-yard line. Instead of rotating 6 times, just do it twice. It had to be watered because
Too hard.
It was, yeah, 2 weeks, and with 2 weeks to go. So, yeah, incredible. We obviously didn't know what was happening at the time, but we ended up, at the end of the year going, wow, that night George put that together. That was iconic. It's like you didn't realize it at the time, but shortly after that, it was like we were there. Like, we were there when that happened. So, and of course, we loved it. I remember watching it for the first time. We had a rehearsal day somewhere where the press box was kind of tilted, and you could kind of see the reflection in the windows of the press box. And obviously, that's all we worked on was across the for the rest of the year. And we would watch. We're like, wow, did you see that? Because we hadn't seen that. There's no phones and Facebooks and hey, watch the show. There's none of that.
Yeah. If you're lucky, sometime during tours, they'll have some video that a parent took, and you get to watch it. If you're lucky. Yeah.
There were times, and it would be rain out days where, we would stay in the gym or whatever, and we were lucky enough to have a VCR, and someone happened to have taken it. And Todd Ryan, taught me, he would have a video camera everywhere. And Todd Ryan, we could talk for days. I love him. He would have a tent, he wouldn't go into the school. He would set up his tent outside the school and have his dog with him and all that. So he would carry a big camcorder, and so we would sometimes watch run-throughs or stuff like that, or listen to judges' tapes, but it wasn't very often. Certainly not what it is now.
No.
So
Todd was amazing. He obviously came over after Star. We benefited, and he came over with Ron Hardin in 94 and 95.
Yeah, you guys did.
Yeah, yeah, we benefited a lot that year from that.
So you talk about 91 being your third year with the Corps. Were you starting to take on more of a leadership responsibility?
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time. I'm not going to lie. And I've told Donnie this. I told him, I was like,
Now, you talk Donnie, you're talking Donnie Van Dorn?
Donnie Van Dorn, yes. My mentor. And I've told him, but I was like, I was so pissed off not going up to the lead line. Especially that year, because I didn't get to play. And of course here's my ego coming out in a little bit. There were like 2 or 3 guys. I was like, I could play that better. Or the other one that it's you everybody sings the mellophone line, but there were some cool trumpet parts. Stuff like that. I was like, I could play that. Of course, Jimmer is brilliant. The fingerings weren't that hard, so I could look at one of the lead trumpets and I'd be like, oh, it's just that, and then I could play it. I didn't have to look at the music. So I was pissed. But when I looked at the section, I was the experienced member in the second trumpet line, so I understood, especially now being a caption head. I was like, dude, I do the same thing. You got to have that strong member in each section. You got to have that. Now, funny thing is, do you guys know Frank Sullivan?
I don't.
No, I don't.
Frank Sullivan is he arranged. Does he still do it? He lives down in Tampa and writes for Tarpon Springs.
Okay. Yeah.
But he has written for Blue Stars a lot. He's done a lot of their really cool shows recently. Huge fan of him. He was in that second trumpet line, and that was his first year. So, in Star. So, cool second trumpet line to be in. But I was like, but like to answer your question, yes, I ended up, and I was never told I was a section leader. We didn't really do that. It was like, if you're going to be a leader, you're going to step up and you're going to be a leader, and it's going to happen naturally. You're not going to have a title. You're just going to do it. That's kind of how it worked.
Yeah,
with us.
Back then there was just like horn sergeant, and that was it. And whole drumline section leader. There wasn't like subsection leaders.
And it wasn't even announced. It was like, that's the person that's going to do it because they're going to do it. They're going to step up and they're going to do it. So, so I was ultimately, I was not the second trumpet section leader. It wasn't that, but I was, a third year member. I had done it before. You know, I was a veteran, and Donnie wanted that veteran in every single section. You know, second mellows, third baritones, whatever it was. So I was that, and then I moved up to lead the following year in '92.